powerful 1985 Toyota Supra and Dan Gurney take on the Big Apple. The Supra's twin-cam electronically fuel-injected 6 roars up Fifth Avenue. The four-wheel disc brakes set up the high-speed turn across town. The independent suspension absorbs the punishment of city streets. How does Dan feel surrounded by all this luxury? This is fun! With the George Washington Bridge in sight, Dan and the Supra have brought new meaning to the term rush hour. This is the right stuff.
Hey, I'm Fred with Triple S, and what we want to do is go a little bit more in depth on some of the cars that we build and work on here at the shop. This content you like to see, remember to like and subscribe. Right behind me is 1985 Toyota Supra. This was the second generation of Celica Supra, actually, just before the change to the third generation Supra, which was the first real Toyota Supra. Up until then, it shared the same chassis as the Toyota Celica. Both were front-engine, rear-wheel drive cars. After the change, the Celica went to a front-engine, front-wheel drive configuration, and the Toyota Supra was born. Up until then, it was known as the Celica Supra. The main difference that the Supra had over the Celica was the front end, as well as it had the 6-cylinder 5M GE engine. The M Series engines were actually Toyota's last solely developed performance engine. They date back all the way to the Toyota 2000 GT, a legendary car. James Bond drove one. It was absolutely beautiful. And it ended with the 7M GTE, which was in the next series. This particular car does not have a 5M GE. We went with something a little bit more modern. This is a 2JZ GTE non-VVTi, converted to a single turbo. It is a tiny Borg Warner EFR setup. It spools like crazy. Sheet metal intake. Effectively, it's stock pistons, rods. Austin completely refreshed this engine, new bearings, gaskets, you name it. And this particular car actually makes 400 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque at 3,800 RPM. So it's a real stump puller. It's really fun to drive. The torque curve's really linear. It's almost like a V8. The car has full coilover suspension. It's running 15-inch work equip 01s. These are some of the most beautiful wheels out there on a vintage car. Speaking to the vintage of this car, this is really where things begin to get more modern. It doesn't feel like an older car when you drive it, especially with this power plant. But you know, the power steering, the suspension, everything is a lot more towards a modern vehicle. Whereas the earlier cars, the 70s cars, you can tell you're driving an old vehicle. But when you're in something like this, it actually drives really, really nice. So this particular car, the suspension ride height is set to useless, but that doesn't stop us from driving it around when we have to. It's really difficult to get in and out of parking spaces, garages, even out of the shop. It's quite challenging, but it looks cool and that's what matters. It's got a full 3-inch exhaust. It's tuned on ECU Master Black, tuned by Elliott King Tuner. Raymond actually did the head on this engine. Austin did the bottom end. I put it together. Alito put it in. Corey welded up all of the intercooler piping, and the exhaust I've got on Kijiji for 150 bucks, and it works okay. 4-wheel discs, power windows. This was a full jam car, so it's got the digital dash, the sunroof. We've got a shirts tucked in, shift knobs, Sparco steering wheel, and the original interior, which is actually held up fantastically. This car, for as messed with as it is actually really clean underneath. Rust issues are something that's very common in these older vehicles. They were pretty affordable up until a little while ago, and now they're climbing up in value. So if you're seeing one that's cheap, make sure you check it for rust. You know, that is obviously the kryptonite of any vintage Japanese car. We're here in Alberta. Rust is an issue. Check the frame rails. Body panels can be fixed, and you can find stuff if you look really hard. but I'm very impressed with this car and how clean it really is. Just got a new tune from Allie. I think it's working pretty good. I mean, for a car as low as it is, it actually rides really smooth, except when you have to overcome an obstacle. The clutch in this car is pretty unforgiving. It's drift motion, super single. I actually got it from another Supra guy that decided to go for a twin plate, but I kind of like the single. It's a little chattery, but it holds this power level easily, and I don't really mind it. I really want to figure out what's scraping in the bottom though. I mean, yeah, I have quite a few cars, quite a few Supras. This one's kind of special. Growing up in the 80s, I've been doing this a long time, but when I was a kid and I would see one of these drive by, I would just go crazy. It had that, typical 80s wedge-shaped supercar, like Lotus Esprit or the old Ferrari 308 Dinos. They all kind of had this beautiful wedge shape, and that kind of was ingrained in my mind as a kid. As that's what a sports car looks like. And obviously in Edmonton, you didn't see many Ferraris and Lotuses driving around, but you did see these. And man, they were cool on the road. This particular car came to me from another fellow who bought it off another fellow. Had no engine in it. It was in a little bit of disrepair. And I always loved this car, and I had to take the opportunity to pick it up. Had all the spare parts. I mean, again, not often do people just have these kind of parts laying around. Fortunately, I did. Had a spare R154, had the block and internals, and obviously the guys were able to put it together for me pretty quick. But to me, this is the first real Supra, even though it's still a Celica Supra. It's the car that kind of ignited me to buy my first Mark III Supra, which is what got me to get my first Mark IV. There's something about this car, it's a vibe. I always like to say, when you drive a car, it's more about how it makes you feel. I don't really care how fast it is. I'm of the opinion I'd rather drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. That's kind of why I went with a small turbo on this car, and I went a little too small. I have a problem of not being able to build a car that's less than 500 horsepower. I don't know why. It just kind of happens that way. So this time I went super conservative on the turbo, and the power delivery on this car is amazing. It's light, it's nimble, it handles better, in my opinion, than the other Supras. It's still a small hatchback at the end of the day with a ton of power. And it feels great. It feels great to drive. Definitely needs some more work, but that's part of the journey.